Every once in a while, I will meet up with musicians and singers who were part of the music scene back in the noughties. Now, we spent 2 decades playing, recording, touring. It always seemed like we were travelling somewhere. The film Planes, Trains and Automobiles comes to mind. It sounds kind of glamorous, but most of our touring days were done out the back of an old red Royal Mail postal van, a van postman Pat would probably be proud of. I mean, life happened on tour. Laughs happened on tour. Debates and fights. Love happened on tour. I took my wife on her honeymoon to Manchester during one of our tours, and it's crazy looking back now, but we played at the Manchester Apollo the night after Motorhead had adorned the stage. So if you're looking for love, the moral of the story is forget Paris or Florence. You need Manchester, Motorhead and Lemmy. Well, maybe not, but they were the good old days. When I bump into old colleagues, we laugh, we tell stories, the good ones, the bad ones and the eccentric ones, but a thought came to me recently. Maybe some of those guys have never actually moved on, as if those days were the best years of their lives, and their faith journey or adventure ended the day they got off that last tour bus. I wonder, would you go back to the way things used to be? There's this moment when the prophet Isaiah sees the future and tells the listeners who have been brought up on these iconic stories of Moses and signs and wonders in Egypt, the Exodus, God's deliverance from slavery, and says, forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. Like, really? Forget the former things? Forget our history, the patriarchs, the signs and wonders? Isaiah was prophesying into a new day, the rise and fall of another empire, Babylon. God's people would be taken away into exile, but then God would bring them home again. But the prophecy also carried a second message. A new kind of Messiah, hundreds of years later, would save them, one who would blot out their transgressions and remember their sin no more. You see, no matter how great our past is, change is difficult. I mean, change can feel like a wilderness, a wasteland. I have 2 daughters and man, they're growing up fast. I mean, they're turning into women, and sometimes you will hear parents joking around. I think a boy fancies them or they've fallen in love with someone. And at the surface level, dads are like, we're laughing, but inside we have knots in our stomach because change is painful. Life isn't static, it ebbs and flows. It has a season attached to it. Kids grow up, people move away, we lose loved ones. Good people who did their very best still get divorced. You know, bands break up, teams and culture changes. Things aren't how they were. And when seasons change, it can feel like an emotional wasteland, a wilderness of sorts. But God's purposes still make highways and streams for us in a new day. Hundreds of years later, the teachers of the law are still dwelling on the good old days. They don't understand why Jesus' disciples are not stepping in line and following the rules set up by the GOAT, the greatest of all time, Moses. And Jesus says, no one puts new wine into old wineskins. If not, the old wineskins will burst. New wine goes into new wineskins. In ancient times, they would put wine into leathered animal skins. As the wine would breathe and ferment, the wineskin would stretch and be shaped around the new wine. But if you put new wine into old wineskins, then the wine would breathe and expand, and brittle containers would split and the wine would be lost. Jesus was saying, I am the new wine, and I'm looking for new containers, men and women of the way who will carry my spirit. Imagine that, being so caught up in the iconography of the past that we miss the Messiah, the great I am, who was standing right in front of us. Have you ever spoke to a married couple who have stability in their marriage but maybe not intimacy? They talk about how things used to be when they travelled and had kids, but now there's this empty glazed look in their eyes, and you wonder, would they go back to that time? Maybe you spoke to church builders who loved the way the church was when it first started, when everything seemed spontaneous, but everything isn't like back then, and we aren't who we were back then. I mean, do people actually believe their best days of serving and loving Jesus are behind them? How many people sit in organisations and become museums to the past instead of vibrant science fairs to the future? You know, we aren't the same people we were back then, and back then was not better. It was pioneered by men and women who lived fully alive in their present moment. And movements will continue to flourish by men and women who pioneer in their present day. How much time and energy do we spend wishing things were the way they used to be? How much time do we spend mentally hoarding past significance? We should honour the past and build for the future, but have faith for this day. If we need to celebrate the past, let's celebrate it. Throw a party. If you need to grieve, take time and lament. If you've been taking score, let it go, but then move on. A new day is waiting for you. Isaiah shouts, do not dwell on the past. The word dwell means to not give too much weight to the past. Celebrate it. Learn from it. Grieve it, but don't pitch your tent there. There can be a kind of inward sickness that takes over when we believe that things were better back then. When we are holding on to yesterday, our hands are not free to grasp our new day. Another time, Jesus tells his followers to not worry about tomorrow because tomorrow has enough problems of its own. Maybe you're so caught up in the fantasy of one of these days or the conspiracy of tomorrow. It's just easier in this cultural moment to hide behind the comfort blanket of screens or rather than deal with the reality of today. Proverbs says, don't boast in tomorrow, for we have no guarantee of what it will bring. If you are a parent, the goal is not to freeze your kids in time, and you can't freeze your college friends or movements in time either. The goal is to be so aware of what God's Spirit is doing in this new day that you don't miss a thing, that you live life with no regrets, that you live so captured and filled with the Spirit of Jesus that, man, looking back then, living back then, keeping score of back then just seems unthinkable. God is saying, forget the former things. I am doing a new thing. Are you lamenting? Then invite the Holy Spirit into that season. The book of Lamentations says the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end because they are new every morning. So may we accept the past for what it is. May you grieve what needs to be grieved. May you celebrate what needs to be celebrated. And may we be fully alive with the Spirit of Jesus for our new day.